Hi everyone. Okay, so here's hopefully my my attempt at making my video here just through Zoom at least in a screen share. So hopefully this turns out. I don't think the quality is as good, but you should be able to navigate with me. So as I mentioned, it's a quick little crash course on XD. So this is our home window from where we start. So you can see your different options of your artboard size. So we have our phone. You can drop that little arrow and you can get a bunch of different phone sizes. The iPhone X, good one to start with because it's one of the smaller ones. So generally, you would just have some extra padding on the exterior if your phone size did go up. And then for web, same thing. You've got a few options, but I think the 1920 is a good one to start with. So we'll just double click that and we'll start there. So just a few quick things to get the ball rolling. So always keeping things organized because at some point you will end up with quite a few different screens. So keeping everything labeled nicely is best. So here's our web format size. So we can even call this web desktop. Obviously, it should be fairly clear. But just to go through a few tools. So we've got our basic tools down the side. This little guy will be where you either A, want to add some extra artboards, and you can do so just like we did in the home screen. So you can select different ones. This will come in handy when we do go ahead and add our phone in there. Okay, now from here we have our libraries and our assets. Whoops. So we can click on our assets and here's where we have our color palette. So we generally want to stick to a few colors when we're creating our final web comps. But for the purpose of our wireframing, we stick to like a very basic monochromatic look. We don't want our client getting distracted by colors. So for the most part, those are done in various shades of blue, all within the same tone. So for instance, 100% of this blue, 70% of 50%, etc. Or black and gray, and or more not quite black but gray, unless it's for text. Our character style. So this is where we can add our different styling for, say, our headlines, for our body copy, etc. You don't want to have too many different elements, especially when you have character styles, especially when you do have a small site. So you just want to pick the headline, a subhead. So an H1, H2, maybe an H3. H3. That's what we call the headlines, or maybe body copy. So next where we go is components. So this is say certain things that we've created that we want, to style the same way throughout our website. So a button is a great example. So say for instance, that was a button. We're going to make it that pink tone. If I right click, I can make it a component and there it is. So now anytime or anywhere on my document, I can just drag those over and plunk them on. You just right click and delete. Okay, from here is our layer. So again, making sure we keep things labeled, we keep things organized, super, super important, or it's really gonna hurt you down the line. And these are plugins, which we won't worry about quite yet, but they will come in handy at some point. Down the side here, we have our basic alignment tools, different components, transform. Your layout of your grid is quite important, and that's one thing I do wanna make sure that I do go over with you. So we can turn that on, and this is where we get our basic grid. For instance, oh, I had that ready. It seems to have disappeared on me. So different ways you can see how a grid or how a website is broken down into a grid. So again, you have your gutter widths, and that's where you kind of steer clear of. It just keeps things really organized, really well laid out. The more columns you have, the more essentially the more freedom you have to place things, but also at the same time keeping in mind that's also gets, the more you have, the trickier it can be to keep things tidy and organized. So it's all up to you. There is a basic grid that is set up here in XD, but you can go ahead and adjust by, say adding 16 columns, a wider gutter. Obviously, if you have your width, everything is calculated to fit here. So we can bring that back down, and then maybe we open up that getter. So lots of different things you can do. And this is just, with preference and your own experience, what you think works best. So we'll just leave it at that. You can also click that and that'll default. So from there, this is using our arrow, click on your page, and you can either check mark that off, or you Command Shift apostrophe, and that brings that up and back. Okay, so next I'll just turn that off for now, is when we do click our artboard, we can go ahead and make this larger. So this is if you've got a nice long scrolling site, you would utilize this. You generally want to keep your important elements up above this dotted line, because generally when you land on their homepage, you, for the most part, won't see anything below this. So you always want to keep your important elements above that line. You can, in fact, move this, but I would suggest just leaving it as is. You can also do so the same thing happens when you have your mobile file up there. Obviously, you can extend it. That's where people scroll, but you don't want to move that dotted line because that's pretty much the size you're working with. Say your iPhone, that's the basic size. So if you put your important elements or you start to move this, it's kind of not really working as intended. Okay, so before we get too deep into, kind of just very, very roughly laying this out, next step would be to download your UI kit. So you can go File, Get UI Kits, and More UI Kits. From here, that's going to pop you onto an Adobe website. Scroll all the way down, and you'll find this little guy here that says XD Wireframes. You get the kit. It's a zip file. You can go ahead and download that zip file, and you'll have mobile elements, and you'll also have desktop elements. You can go ahead and download that way. I've also downloaded and popped them in here under the week 6 and your resources. So just to show you what those look like. So when you get into your web formats, there is tons. So if you zoom all the way out, you can see how much is in there. So this is where we go and we can borrow these elements. So this is, say, a nice version for a pop-up. So that's in our call to action and footer section. Say you have a pricing table you need to do. Different forms always come in handy. Your basic UI elements. So we've got some colors to say maybe work in that monochromatic blue tone. Zooming in, we've got a couple footers, a nice section with some type. We've got some icons, a few buttons, etc., some social icons. So much here. Just keeping in mind when you do grab that stuff, everything is grouped. Okay, so, and to ungroup, you Command Shift G, and that would just get you the ability to move those little guys out of there. Okay, so let's go back to our quick example here. I'm just going to go ahead and save this. I've done several of these trying to get my video to work, so I'm surprised I'm only at demo number 4. So to get the ball rolling, let's use our rectangle tool, and we're going to go ahead and let's make this, say, a color. So I don't want any border, but say I do want to put a fill on that. And instead of guessing our colors, you can either work with a nice grayscale format. This is where this little section will come in handy, or you can, again, use this. And we can go ahead and copy all of those colors back to my demo, and we'll paste those colors. And here's where the fun happens. So once we paste those colors and we select all of those, we hit that plus sign, and now all those colors appear in there. So now I don't have to guess. I don't need to, use my eyedropper to pick anything up. I can just go ahead and maybe make it this tone. Maybe I want to make it this tone. Nice way to quickly reference that, or nice way to utilize your colors.